Her grandson slammed the car door on her leg and called her dead weight. Irene Haskins, retired librarian and widow, didn't flinch. Cody laughed, tossed her car keys in the air and said, "It's practically our house now." By the time he woke up the next morning, the deed, the garage, and even the spare mailbox key were gone from his reach. She'd raised generations. Now she was evicting them. And when they tried to fight for her home, they found out she'd already given it away. But not to them. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The air inside the car was stale with the smell of fast food wrappers and too many unsaid things. Irene shifted in the back seat, her gloved fingers fumbling for the door handle. The winter chill seeped through the crack as she nudged the door open with her hip. Before she could plant her feet on the pavement, the door swung hard, slammed shut with a metallic thunk that rocked her backward. "Move it, Grandma. We're not your chauffeurs," Cody muttered, already halfway up the curb, keys jingling in his hand. The impact jarred Irene's shoulder. Her breath caught, not from pain, but from the sharp, immediate knowledge. He didn't even look back. In the front seat, Marlene scrolled through her phone, thumb flicking like nothing had happened. No gasp, no reprimand, just a sigh, like she'd been made late for something that didn't matter. The car locks clicked. Irene opened the door again slowly, this time with her foot braced to keep it from bouncing back. She stepped out, one foot, then the other, clutching her purse like a lifeline. The wind picked up and lifted her coat hem, dusting her stockings with salt-crusted slush. She closed the door gently behind her. Then she straightened her spine, tugged her collar neat, and brushed the road grit from her coat sleeves with a practiced hand. She didn't call after them. She didn't need to. Inside the grocery store, the heat hit her cheeks like a slap. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, and the air smelled faintly of onions and overripe bananas. Cody and Marlene were already 3 aisles ahead, pushing a half-full cart like it was a shared mission. Cody leaned over his phone, laughing at something. Marlene dropped 2 frozen meals into the cart without looking at the labels. They didn't look for her, not even a glance. Irene walked slower than she needed to, her low heels tapping with quiet precision on the linoleum. She passed displays of discounted Valentine's candy and bins of bruised apples until she stopped at an aisle with office supplies. She didn't need anything from this aisle, but she stood there anyway. Her eyes landed on a wire rack of spiral-bound notebooks, the cheap kind, with thin paper and flimsy covers. Red, blue, green, yellow. She reached for a black one. Clean, unassuming, nothing flashy, just space to think. Next, a pen. She tested a few caps until she found one that clicked with a satisfying snap. She clicked it again, then once more. A mother with 2 noisy kids brushed past her, offering a distracted, "Excuse me." Irene barely noticed. She added the notebook and pen to her basket. Not the cart, her basket. Cody and Marlene could buy what they wanted. She wasn't part of their tab anymore. Near the registers, she saw them again. Cody talking loudly, gesturing toward a self-checkout line. Marlene laughing too hard at something that wasn't funny. Neither looked around. Irene paid for her items in cash. The clerk, a teenager with chipped green nail polish, handed her the receipt with a bored, "Have a good one." She folded the receipt and tucked it neatly into the back pocket of the notebook. One line written in her careful cursive filled the first page. "Today, I became invisible. That makes me dangerous." Outside, the wind cut deeper, carrying the hiss of tires on wet asphalt and the beep of a reversing SUV. Irene walked ahead of them now, steps firm, the notebook clutched to her chest. As she reached the car, she stopped. Waited. Cody hit the unlock button from behind her, not realizing she was already there. She opened the driver's door, her driver's door, and sat down in the seat he always claimed. The fabric was warm from his body. She didn't care. When Cody finally reached the passenger side and saw her behind the wheel, his smirk faltered. "You're driving?" he asked, voice sharp with disbelief. Irene didn't answer. She adjusted the mirror with one slow, deliberate hand, then looked him straight in the eyes. "Buckle up," she said. "I wouldn't want you getting hurt." The front door stuck like always. A groan in the hinges, a soft crack as the weather-swollen frame gave way. Irene stepped inside and shut it with a finality that echoed. The hallway was dim, the air still carrying the faint smell of lemon oil and the cold bite of winter trailing in. After her. She set the black notebook on the console table by the door and slipped off her gloves. Her hands moved with quiet certainty, each motion deliberate. There was no rush. Not now. In the den, the safe was still tucked behind the panel of faux books her husband had installed decades ago. Harold always had a flair for the dramatic, thought it added some Bond mystique to the otherwise ordinary house. She had humored him then. Now she was grateful for the privacy. The dial turned easily under her fingers. 15 right, 37 left, 12 right. The numbers engraved in muscle memory. With a metallic click, the door released. Inside, a few worn manila envelopes, a small fireproof pouch, and a dusty jewelry box that hadn't been opened in years. Irene reached for the envelope marked "Property Deed." Haskins, its label handwritten in Harold's firm, slanted script. She pulled the folded papers free and laid them on the dining table beneath the afternoon light. The house creaked around her, wood settling, pipes groaning softly in the walls, the same familiar sounds she'd lived with for over 40 years. Her eyes moved down the page, line by line, parcel number, township, acreage, owner of record, Irene M. Haskins. No mention of Cody, no Marlene. Her name. Alone. She let her fingers rest on the paper. The weight of it wasn't just legal, it was generational, earned, preserved, now insulted. A low, guttural engine sound pulled her to the window. Cody, slouched behind the wheel, one hand hanging out of the open window, eased her car into the driveway like it belonged to him. He jerked it into park, then blasted the horn twice to get Marlene's attention from inside. The beeping startled a squirrel off the bird feeder. Irene watched him slam the door shut and toss his keys into the air like a bored valet. He didn't look at the house, just swaggered up the porch steps, phone in hand, talking loudly about hitting the gym later. When the door opened and closed behind him, Irene didn't move for a full minute. She looked back at the deed, then opened a side drawer beneath the kitchen counter, her drawer, the one nobody ever touched, and peeled back the lining. Taped inside was the spare mailbox key, right where she'd left it 23 years ago after Harold's heart surgery. She pulled it free, slid it onto her key ring with a soft click. Upstairs, Cody's footsteps pounded across the floor like an afterthought. Marlene's voice drifted down the hallway. Something about someone needing to fix the bathroom sink. Irene opened her laptop. The screen flickered awake. The background image, a lake from a forgotten vacation, wide and quiet. In the search bar, she typed slowly, each word hitting harder than the last. How to legally remove adult family members from your house. The results came up fast, too fast. She scanned them without flinching. Evicting adult children from your home. What are your rights? Protecting your property when boundaries are crossed. How to end a family arrangement, legally and safely. A soft smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It didn't reach her eyes. From the hallway, Cody yelled, "Hey, Grandma, we're out of cereal. You want me to Venmo you $5 or something?" Irene didn't respond. She just opened a new tab and bookmarked her first legal guide. Then she closed the deed folder with quiet reverence and placed it back in the safe. Tomorrow, she'd start with the attorney. But tonight? She would sleep well, for the first time in weeks. The sun wasn't up yet, but Irene was. She moved like a woman with a secret, her robe tied tight at the waist, hair pinned back, face washed and alert. The house around her still slept. Upstairs, Cody's door hung ajar, the dull hum of his phone charger glowing red against the wall. Down the hall, Marlene's room remained shut, the faint sound of her white noise machine murmuring ocean waves through wood. In the kitchen, Irene brewed a single cup of coffee, black. No sugar, no cream. She didn't sit. She drank it standing by the window, eyes locked on the driveway where her car waited. Hers, still, in every legal sense of the word. By 6:10, she was dressed. Wool coat buttoned, notebook tucked into her bag alongside the deed, and a printed screenshot of the legal advice she'd read the night before. She wore the same brooch she had at Harold's memorial, not for sentiment, but because it reminded her of resilience. She slipped the keys from the hook, the one Cody never looked at, and stepped outside without making a sound. The car started with a low growl, the engine cold but loyal. She eased out of the driveway slowly, mindful not to let the tires crunch too loudly over the frost-glazed concrete. As she reached the end of the block, she glanced into the rearview mirror and saw the porch light flicker off behind her. For the first time in weeks, she was the one driving away. The attorney's office sat in a brick building next to a dentist and a dry cleaner just off Main Street. It wasn't grand, but it had clean lines, a steady feel. She parked neatly between two SUVs, turned off the ignition, and sat with both hands on the wheel for a moment, the silence pressing gently in her ears. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her lipstick was a touch faded. She applied a fresh coat with one sure swipe. Inside, the waiting room smelled of new carpet and old coffee. The receptionist, a young man with a buzz cut and flawless nails, greeted her politely, asking her to wait just a moment. The door behind the front desk opened. "Irene Haskins?" the attorney asked, eyebrows raised. She stood. "That's me." Erica Tolan was exactly as she remembered her. Blazer sharp, hair clipped back, expression somewhere between efficient and compassionate. They'd met once, years ago at Harold's will signing. Now the stakes were different. Personal. "I didn't expect you to come in alone," Erica said as they walked into the office. Irene sat across from her, placing the manila envelope on the desk like she was sliding down a chess piece. "I don't trust anyone else to speak for me anymore," Irene said. Erica's eyes softened as she opened the envelope. She scanned the deed, nodding slowly. "Still in your name," she confirmed. Irene leaned in slightly. "They park in my driveway, sleep under my roof, use my power, eat my food, and talk to me like I'm lucky to be breathing in their presence." Erica shut the folder. "You're well within your rights, Irene. More than that, you're standing on solid legal ground. We can start this process today." "I'm not just taking the keys back," Irene said, voice firm and without hesitation. "I'm taking the whole damn garage." A smile flickered across Erica's face, not condescending, not amused, but something between admiration and respect. "All right," she said, opening a blank legal pad. "Let's start drawing the lines they've chosen to ignore." As Erica began writing, Irene sat back in her chair, hands folded, eyes steady. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink. Outside the window, the sun had finally broken the horizon, faint light spilling across the rows of parked cars like a slow reveal. She wouldn't be invisible much longer. By the time Irene pulled back into the driveway, the frost had melted to dew. The siding on the house gleamed faintly in the morning sun, deceptively peaceful. The home looked the same, brick, ivy-choked on the east wall, curtains drawn upstairs, but everything inside Irene had shifted. She parked off to the side, neatly aligned with the garden bed Harold once tended. The same bed Cody trampled last fall while roughhousing with his friends, never once glancing down at the crushed mums. Irene turned off the ignition and sat still. A beat, then another. The front door creaked open before she could reach it. Cody, hoodie half-zipped, yawning like he'd just been mildly inconvenienced by consciousness, stepped outside, scanning the driveway. "You took the car?" he asked, half laughing, half accusing. Irene didn't answer. She walked past him, her coat brushing his sleeve. He looked at the spot where he normally parked, squinted at the alignment, then back at her like she'd thrown off the balance of the solar system. Later that evening, the kitchen smelled of overcooked meatloaf and burnt coffee. Marlene stood at the sink, swirling her wine glass with theatrical fatigue, while Cody thumbed through his phone at the table. "We're gonna need to replace that water heater soon," Marlene said without looking up. "Tommy said it's corroded near the base. Could be a few hundred, maybe more." Irene stirred her tea slowly. Her notebook sat closed beside her, just out of reach but fully present. Marlene turned, leaning against the counter with the same tired smile she used when asking for favors she didn't want labeled as such. "I know you get your pension next week," she added. "Could you chip in?" Irene placed her spoon gently on the saucer. "Let's talk about ownership first." Cody snorted without looking up. Marlene blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said," Irene repeated, "we should clarify who owns what before we discuss repairs." Marlene crossed her arms. "Oh, come on, Irene, this isn't a debate. You live here too. You live here," Irene interrupted, "because I allow it, not because you're entitled to it." The silence that followed was brittle, but it held. Marlene set down her wine glass a little too hard. "You're not going to be around forever. You think it's wise to stir the pot when your health—" Irene stood up, not fast, not threatening, just enough. "I'll let you know what I think in writing." She left the kitchen before another word could be said, her steps unhurried but final. Upstairs, the hallway light flickered. She made a note to replace the bulb, not for them, for the house. In the quiet of her bedroom, Irene sat at the small desk by the window. The same desk where she'd paid taxes, written sympathy, cards, balanced checkbooks. She flipped open her kitchen notepad, the cheap kind Marlene always used for grocery lists and passive-aggressive reminders. On the top page, in bold block letters, she wrote, "Notice." Then she tore the page cleanly, folding it into thirds. She copied it by hand twice more, one for each of them. The next morning, she walked to the post office. Snow was falling lightly, brushing her coat sleeves and catching in the grooves of the sidewalk. She waited in line behind a woman sending a care package and a man trying to return a broken waffle iron. When it was her turn, she slid the envelopes forward. "Certified, please," she said. The clerk gave a tight nod, slid the forms toward her. Irene filled out the slips with a firm hand. Cody Haskins, Marlene Haskins, her address, written twice. Then, once more, for the return receipts. Back home, she placed the mailing receipts in her notebook, behind the deed copy. She pressed the covers closed with both palms, sealing the weight of what had begun. From the living room, Cody's voice rang out, amused and mocking. "Hey, Grandma, did you order something? Got a signature-required thing from the postman." Irene didn't answer. She was already walking toward the front door. The dining table was already set when Cody trudged in from the porch, holding the opened envelope in one hand and the letter in the other, like he'd just been handed a pop quiz written in Latin. He waved the paper in the air. "What the hell is this?" Irene didn't flinch. She stood by the sideboard, setting down the last of the coffee mugs, one for each of them, though she hadn't made any coffee. "It's exactly what it says." Marlene entered from the hallway, her face pinched. She wore her worn fleece robe and a fresh coat of suspicion. "What is it?" she asked Cody, reaching for the letter. He slapped it into her palm. "It's from some attorney," he said, pacing. "Says our license to reside and park here is terminated? What is she talking about?" Irene walked to the table, pulled out a chair and sat, slowly, knees stiff but spine straight. She folded her hands atop the black notebook. Marlene skimmed the letter, her mouth moving silently through the legal phrases. "You sent this?" she asked, voice rising. Irene met her eyes. "I had it delivered." Cody threw his arms up. "So what, you're evicting us?" "Not yet," Irene said, calm as ever. "I'm offering you options." He scoffed. "What options?" "You can either pay fair rent," she said evenly, "or find your own keys." Marlene's laugh came out jagged. "You've lost your mind. We've been helping you. Cody drives you everywhere. I cook dinner. You microwave plastic trays and never rinse the sink," Irene replied. "And Cody drives my car, my gas, my insurance." Cody stepped closer, jaw tight. "We're family. You owe us. You think we wanted to move in here? We've made sacrifices." Irene tilted her head slightly. "You slammed the door on someone, Cody. Don't act shocked when it locks behind you." The line hit hard. The room went quiet. Then Marlene's eyes narrowed. "We're not leaving," she said. "You can't just throw us out. We live here. We've contributed." "To what?" Irene asked. "The electric bill I still pay? The roof I had fixed after the storm while you were in Cancun?" "We painted the bathroom," Marlene snapped. Irene turned to the sideboard, pulled a second letter from the drawer, and handed it over. "That's my attorney's filing notice. I'll be submitting formal eviction paperwork this week." Cody's voice cracked with fury. "You're going to court over this?" Irene nodded once. "I already have a case number." Cody dropped into a chair like he'd been struck. He rubbed his hands together, breathing fast. Marlene looked down at the paperwork again, then back up, her expression shifting from confusion to calculation. "You know," she said slowly, "this house has been a shared residence for years. Cody's name may not be on the deed, but we've lived here. We've maintained it. That has legal weight." Irene's brow lifted, but she didn't interrupt. "We could fight this," Marlene added. "Implied co-ownership, residency rights, there are laws." For the first time since sitting, Irene smiled, small, cold, and patient. "You're welcome to try," she said, "but the title doesn't bend to wishful thinking." Cody looked up from the table. "We'll fight you. Don't think we won't." "I expect nothing less." Marlene crossed her arms again, posture stiff. "You'll regret this, Irene. Family doesn't treat each other this way." Irene stood, not angry, not flustered. Just done. "You're right," she said, walking toward the hallway. "Family doesn't. That's the difference between us." She left them in the dining room, sitting among cooling mugs and unread letters, and climbed the stairs without a backward glance. Upstairs, she opened her closet and pulled out a lockbox labeled "Mortgage. Paid." Inside, beneath the receipts and photocopies, she found the original purchase contract, the one with Harold's signature and hers, no one else. She laid it flat on the bedspread and whispered, "Let them try." Downstairs, Cody's voice carried faintly through the vents, frantic, already Googling legal terms. Marlene's tone had dropped to that breathy register she used when scheming, not arguing. But Irene? Irene opened her window to the sharp evening air and breathed in, deep. The heater rattled once as it kicked on, a hollow groan through the old ductwork that always came before dawn. Irene was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by paper. Receipts, bank statements, utility bills, grocery totals with her card circled in blue ink, credit card charges for Amazon orders only she made, pharmacy pickup slips, car insurance statements with just her name, 40 years' worth of proof, scattered like puzzle pieces across the braided rug Harold used to call "stubborn as a mule and twice as ugly." The phone on the bed buzzed once. "Erica. They could slow things down if they show even small contributions. Keep everything. We'll document it all." Irene texted back, "Already on it." She stood, joints protesting, and carefully started organizing each paper into stacks. She didn't touch the pages like they were fragile, she touched them like they were ammunition. Downstairs, she heard the water running. Marlene's shower. It always went too long, and Irene always paid the bill. She made a note of that on a yellow legal pad. By noon, the dining table had been converted into a command center. The same place they'd laughed over lasagna years ago now bore the weight of strategy. Labeled manila folders, date-stamped photographs of damages Irene had paid to repair, sticky notes with quick reminders scrawled in her tight, looping cursive. She paused only once, at the crumpled Target receipt where Marlene had once used Irene's card to buy curtains for the guest room, then returned them and pocketed the cash. Irene unfolded the paper gently, then slid it into a clear binder sleeve. Outside, the neighbor's leaf blower roared to life. She looked out the window and saw Tommy across the yard, wrestling orange leaves off his lawn like he was trying to beat the calendar back. Irene slipped on her coat and stepped onto the porch. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of burning firewood. "Tommy," she called out. He looked up, lifted his cap in greeting. "Got a minute?" He shut off the blower and crossed over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You doing all right, Irene?" Things seemed tense. Irene didn't sugarcoat it. "I'm being challenged on ownership. They're claiming residency equals equity." Tommy raised his eyebrows. "They're serious?" "Dead serious." He nodded slowly. "You want me to write something up?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Would you?" "Of course," he said. "Everyone on this street knows you pay for everything. You cover the lawn guy, the plow service, the new gutters last year. Hell, I saw you hauling mulch up that side path last spring when Cody was inside playing Xbox. His tone wasn't angry, it was clear, simple, real. I'd appreciate your statement, Irene said. Include anything you've witnessed. You got it. He tipped his cap again, then paused. You've got more support than you think. That night, Irene sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the binders she'd spent days assembling. She had given it a name. Use, not ownership. It was written on a hand-cut label in black ink, slipped into the spine sleeve. On the front page, she placed a printed photo. The house, taken from the sidewalk in springtime, before the ivy swallowed the east side again. She'd written beneath it, "This home is not a gift. It's a responsibility I upheld, alone." The next morning, she met Erica in her office again. The binder felt heavy in her arms, but steady. Erica flipped through the pages, occasionally nodding, eyes sharp with focus. "This is good," she said. "Very good. Tommy's statement seals the pattern. They've contributed no equity, just noise." Irene smiled, thin and quiet. "That's all they've ever brought." Erica tapped her pen against the table, thoughtful. "They're going to claim emotional duress next, say you're retaliating or confused." "I'm neither," Irene said, "and I've got enough receipts to paper the courthouse." She placed the binder on Erica's desk with purpose. "File it." As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed again, this time from Cody. A single text message. "We talked to someone. You're going to regret starting this." Irene read it once, then deleted it without reply. She stepped outside into the late morning sun. The real paperwork had begun. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and recycled tension. Irene sat perfectly still on the wooden bench outside courtroom 2B, her binder on her lap, spine upright, lips pressed into a calm line that had taken decades to master. Cody and Marlene arrived 10 minutes late. Cody wore a wrinkled dress shirt with the buttons misaligned near the collar, tie loose like a teenager after homecoming. Marlene looked more polished, but her eyes darted between faces in the hallway, reading judgment into every sideways glance. They didn't speak to Irene. She didn't speak to them. Inside the small hearing room, a realtor waited near the judge's bench, a woman in her 50s with a sharp bob and a faux leather portfolio. She introduced herself with the cheerful efficiency of someone trying to remain neutral in a house fire. "Given the current property values in this neighborhood," she said, laying a printed valuation report on the table, "you could list between $310,000 and $340,000 if cosmetic updates are made." Cody perked up like a man offered an inheritance. "And if we sold before the next rate hike?" he asked. The realtor nodded. "Could be advantageous if the ownership dispute is settled quickly, that is." Irene glanced toward the judge, a silver-haired man with a face like a paperweight, heavy, impassive, and hard to read. He raised an eyebrow in Irene's direction. She didn't flinch. "I didn't list this house," she said. The realtor paused. "Pardon?" Irene leaned forward slightly, voice cool and measured. "This property is not on the market. I did not request an appraisal. I did not authorize a sale." The judge looked at Cody and Marlene. "Did either of you retain the realtor?" he asked. Marlene straightened. "We asked for a consultation, on behalf of the household." "There's no legal household without legal claim," Irene replied. "And unless this court rules otherwise, the deed is still in my name alone." The judge turned toward Erica, who offered a stack of photocopies. "All documentation has been submitted, Your Honor. Full title records, financial responsibility breakdown, and a notarized witness statement from a neighbor confirming sole maintenance by Ms. Haskins." He thumbed through the files slowly. The room held its breath. Finally, he spoke. "I'm not making a final ruling today," he said, "but I'll say this. The documentation so far heavily favors Ms. Haskins." Cody muttered something under his breath, loud enough for Irene to hear. She didn't ask him to repeat it. Marlene's expression darkened. She leaned toward Irene, voice a notch too low for the judge but perfectly audible to the table. "You really want to spend the last years of your life like this? Alone in that creaky house with your little notebooks?" Irene's smile was slow and precise. A scalpel, not a show. "I'd rather die alone," she said, "than be buried under your entitlement." The judge cleared his throat. This case is continued to the next hearing date. You'll receive notice by mail." As the bailiff gestured them out, Irene gathered her binder with care and stood. Marlene brushed past her without a glance. Cody followed, jaw tight, fingers tapping at his phone like he was already drafting the next threat. Outside, the sky had turned overcast. Irene pulled her coat tight and paused at the steps. Erica stood beside her, flipping through her notes. "You rattled them," Erica said. Irene exhaled slowly. "Good. They'll escalate," she added. "Count on that." "I am." From the sidewalk, Irene watched as Cody and Marlene climbed into her car, still hers, and sat there longer than necessary. Talking, plotting. She didn't move until they pulled away. Only then did she reach into her coat pocket and pull out a folded note. A reminder she'd written to herself days ago. Control the narrative, or they will. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The fluorescent lights inside the Monroe Community Center flickered like an afterthought, casting a pale glow over the beige tile floors and bulletin boards cluttered with flyers. Free tax prep, low-cost dental screenings, Tuesday yoga for seniors. Irene stood just inside the front doors, her hands resting on the strap of her handbag, watching a group of kids chase a worn soccer ball down the hall. The air smelled like reheated lasagna and old paper, familiar, comforting in a way the courthouse had never been. She hadn't been here in almost 5 years, not since Harold passed. Behind the front desk sat Rachel, hair tucked into a bun, sleeves pushed up past her elbows, fingers flying over a keyboard. She looked up mid-keystroke and blinked. "Irene?" Irene smiled. "That's still my name." Rachel stood, coming around the desk without hesitation, her arms open and honest. "I haven't seen you since... God, when was it? The coat drive?" 3 coat drives ago, Irene said. "At least." They embraced briefly. Rachel stepped back and gave her a once-over. "You look good. Strong. I've had practice lately." Rachel gestured toward the open doors of a small office just off the main hallway. "Come in. Sit. You didn't just drop by to make me cry, did you?" Irene followed her inside, settling into a plastic chair with a soft sigh. She looked around at the cluttered space. Stacks of folders, a corkboard full of sticky notes, a coffee mug labeled, "Not today, Satan." "I have a question," Irene said, leaning slightly forward. "Have you ever heard of someone donating property while they're still alive?" Rachel's brow rose. "Plenty of times. You mean like an early inheritance?" "No," Irene said. "I mean giving it away, with conditions." Rachel leaned back, folding her arms. "You'd need an attorney, a life estate setup maybe. Depends what you're trying to protect." Irene took a breath. "The house is mine, but it won't be for long. Not if they find a way to tear it out from under me. So I want to move faster." "Who's they?" "My grandson." His mother, Rachel, didn't ask more, just nodded. "You're thinking of putting it in trust?" "I'm thinking of giving it a future they can't touch, can't sell, can't live in, but one that still matters." Rachel blinked slowly. "You want to gift it to the shelter program?" "Yes," Irene said, "but not now, not until I'm gone. Until then, I stay. I keep it." Rachel exhaled, then smiled. "You know how rare this kind of clarity is?" "It's not clarity," Irene said. "It's the luxury of finally being too tired to pretend." Later that week, Erica sat across from Irene in her office, flipping through the drafted agreement. "This locks it in," she said. "Life estate deed with charitable remainder interest. Upon your passing, full title transfers to the Monroe Shelter Program. They can't sell it or use it for any purpose except transitional housing, and you keep occupancy and control until your last day." Irene nodded once. "Put it in ink." "You're sure?" "They wanted to bury me in it," she said. "Now someone else gets to live in it. That's balance." Erica smiled. "It's also ironclad." That evening, Irene stood in her living room, the signed document in her hands. The house around her was quiet, the kind of silence that used to scare her. Now, it hummed like resolve. Cody and Marlene wouldn't see this coming. They were too busy plotting how to split something that was no longer theirs. She tucked the document into her notebook behind the tab labeled Final. From the hallway, she could hear them arguing upstairs. something about whose name should have been on the tax return. Let them argue. She had just erased the scoreboard. The slam of the front door rattled the picture frames in the hallway. "Irene!" Cody's voice cracked like a whip through the house. "What the hell is this?" Irene stood in the kitchen, already pouring her tea. Earl Grey, steeped to near black, steadying her hands before the storm hit. Cody barreled in, phone in hand, eyes wide with disbelief and something more primal. Panic. He thrust the screen toward her. "You donated the house? To a damn shelter? What is this crap?" She took a sip before answering. "It's not a donation," she said calmly. "It's a contract. With purpose." Marlene appeared behind him, breathless from the stairs, robe fluttering like a warning flag. "You've been manipulated," Cody hissed. "By that lawyer, or that Rachel woman, whoever convinced you to give away our future." Irene met his eyes, cool and firm. "No one manipulated me? I just outgrew your disrespect." Cody's mouth opened, then shut. Marlene stepped forward, trying her best to soften the moment with performative disbelief. "You can't be serious. You gave away a 6-figure asset to strangers?" "To neighbors," Irene said, "who treat people better than you treat family." Cody paced, fingers twitching. "This can't be legal. You're not even dead yet. What kind of scam lets an old woman give away property while she's still using it?" "It's called a life estate," Irene replied. "Look it up." "Don't be smug, Grandma. You just made the dumbest move of your life." Irene turned away, rinsed her teacup, and set it gently in the drying rack. "Then why are you the one yelling?" she said without turning back. Marlene pulled out her phone. "Fine. You want to play this in the court of public opinion? We'll go to the news. Local grandmother preyed upon by social justice group." "You think people won't eat that up?" "Try it," Irene said, "but do it outside. I don't like shouting in my kitchen." Within hours, a hastily written post from Marlene's Facebook account made the rounds in their suburban Facebook group. "My mother-in-law was coerced into signing away our family home to a program that doesn't even house veterans. We've cared for her for years. Is this how the elderly get protected now?" Underneath it, one like. From someone named Tina, Yoga Tuesdays. 3 comments down, Tommy chimed in, "You lived rent-free for 3 years, Marlene. Let the woman have her damn porch back." By evening, Irene had received 5 emails from neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years, all quiet messages of support. One offered a driveway camera she wasn't using. Another, a referral to a security company. A third wrote simply, "About time, Irene. You deserve peace." Later that week, Tommy showed up at her door with a cardboard box tucked under his arm. "Security cams," he said. "I'll help you wire 'em." Irene motioned him inside. "You have a ladder tall enough for that corner over the garage." "Do I look like a man who uses short ladders?" He set the box down on the floor, then paused. "I read the filing. It's smart. Damn smart." "I needed it to be," Irene said. "They don't come at you straight." Tommy grinned faintly. "Number, but they underestimate straight lines. That's your edge." They installed the first camera by dusk. The red recording light blinked like a tiny sentry in the growing dark. Inside, Irene watched from the kitchen window as Marlene sat sulking on the porch swing, eyes darting between the camera and her phone. Cody paced behind her, still talking too loud, still believing volume meant control. The war had gone digital. But Irene had already changed the locks. She opened her notebook that night, pen gliding smoothly over the page. Day 1 without the illusion of silence. I don't need the whole world to agree. I just need the law. And my footing. Just as she closed it, her email pinged. Subject, URGENT. Response required to allegations of mental incompetence. She stared at the screen. Cliffhanger. The next attack wouldn't be about money, it would be about her mind. The exam room smelled like bleach and old carpet. Neutral art hung on the walls, watercolor flowers, vague pastoral landscapes, but nothing could hide the fact that this was a place where people came to be judged quietly. Irene sat upright in a beige vinyl chair, her coat folded across her lap, her expression unreadable. A clipboard of intake forms rested on the small table beside her, already filled out in black ink. Every I dotted, every T crossed. Across from her sat Dr. Felix Meade, appointed by the court. His glasses rode low on his nose, and he wore the kind of expression reserved for defusing landmines and interviewing widows. "Do you know why you're here, Ms. Haskins?" "To prove I'm sane enough to know what belongs to me," she replied, without blinking. He cracked a faint smile. "Let's start with orientation. What day is it?" "Thursday," she said. "Which is soup night at the community center, but I had to cancel." He nodded, scribbled something. "And who is the current president? Of the country or the HOA?" He paused, smiled again. "The country." She answered, correctly. They continued. Memory recall, logical reasoning, even a task where she had to subtract sevens from 100. Irene performed it slowly but methodically, like someone calculating interest on an unpaid debt. When he finally closed his folder and stood, she stood too. "You seem sharper than most people half your age," he said. "I had to be," she replied. "I've been underestimated since I was 12. 2 days later, Irene stood in front of the same judge who'd heard the property dispute. Erica stood beside her, posture crisp, binder in hand. On the opposite bench, Cody looked bored and hollow, his tie missing entirely this time. Marlene had opted for a pantsuit one size too tight and a silence she was clearly coached into. Dr. Meade gave his report without hesitation. "She's competent, fully, no signs of cognitive decline, coercion, or impaired judgment." The judge turned to Irene. "Mrs. Haskins, do you feel anyone is pressuring you to make these legal decisions?" She didn't hesitate. "I feel free." The judge made a note. "Then this petition for incapacity is denied, stricken from record." Cody muttered a curse beneath his breath. Marlene leaned toward him, whispering fiercely, her nails digging into his arm. Erica adjusted her glasses. "Your Honor, with respect, we intend to file a counterclaim for malicious harassment and recovery of legal costs." The judge nodded. "Submit the paperwork." Outside, Irene stood on the steps of the courthouse again, looking out over the parking lot. The cold stung a little more today, but it wasn't unwelcome. It made her feel present. "That was a waste of your time," she said to Erica. "No," Erica replied. "It was proof. Sometimes proof is worth the walk." That evening, Irene sat down at her desk and typed out a letter to the editor of the local newspaper. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was measured, clear. "I am a homeowner, a widow, a former community volunteer. I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am not fragile. What I am is tired of watching older Americans be treated like burdens when they finally draw boundaries. This is not about family, this is about sovereignty, mine." Irene M. Haskins, age 72, still standing. 3 days later, it was published online and reprinted in the Sunday edition. By noon, the comments began pouring in. "Preach, Irene. She's what I want to be when I'm 70. Just because they're your relatives doesn't mean they're your right." Even the barista at the local coffee shop called her by name when she picked up her drink. "You're the one who wrote that thing." The house. Lady. I loved it. That night, Irene sat with her tea and reread every comment, every name. Each word added a layer to her armor. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. Incoming call, private number. Voicemail left. She pressed play. Cody's voice, warped with fury and desperation. "You don't get to win like this. We'll find another way. You think people are done watching you? Think again." She pressed delete. Then she locked her phone in her drawer. The navy dress had been hanging in her closet for years, still wrapped in dry cleaner's plastic. Irene peeled it free with careful fingers, smoothing the sleeves, pressing the seams flat across her bed. She hadn't worn it since Harold's retirement dinner, back when people still said Mrs. Haskins like it meant something. She added a string of modest pearls, the kind that didn't shout but never got ignored, and pinned her hair up the way Rachel had once shown her. Soft, intentional, not overly careful. By the time the car from the Monroe Community Center pulled up, she was waiting on the porch with her coat buttoned and her heels already breaking in again. The dinner was held in a rented banquet hall, the kind of space that tried to be elegant on a budget. Satin chair covers, battery-powered candles, too much beige. Irene was seated near the front, flanked by Rachel on one side and a woman named Loretta who ran the Women's Job Readiness Program. "People are buzzing," Rachel whispered, leaning over. "A few donors read your op-ed. They asked to meet you. Irene blinked slowly, absorbing the weight of it. Funny, she said. All I did was tell the truth. Rachel smiled. That's why it worked. The dinner was chicken cordon bleu that no one touched, and a silent auction table stocked with weekend cabin rentals, themed gift baskets, and one hand-painted birdhouse that had already hit $300. After dessert, Rachel stepped up to the podium. The microphone screeched once, then settled. Tonight, she said, we recognize not just generosity, but courage. One of our own, a woman who's lived quietly among us for decades, has reminded us that home isn't something you protect after you're gone. It's something you define while you're still standing in the doorway. She gestured toward Irene. Irene Haskins changed the trajectory of our housing program by doing what others wouldn't. She gave more than property. She gave clarity. And tonight, we honor her. Applause broke out. Warm at first, then rising to a full standing ovation. Irene remained seated for a moment, stunned, then slowly rose. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She simply nodded once, not in thanks, but in acknowledgement. One of the donors, a woman in a crisp navy pantsuit and diamond studs, turned to Rachel and murmured, 10,000? Unrestricted. Because of her, Irene didn't hear the words, but she felt them land. After the program, Tommy appeared near the punch table in a suit that looked like it had seen one too many 4th of July weddings. He raised a glass of ginger ale in her direction. You clean up good, he said, grinning. Irene smirked. Don't let the pearls fool you. I still sleep with pepper spray in my nightstand. They stood for a moment, watching the volunteers dance to a tinny cover of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Feels strange to be respected again, she said quietly. You never stopped deserving it, Tommy said. You just had to remind the room. Across town, Marlene sat on the living room couch with her laptop perched on her knees. She scrolled through photo after photo on the Monroe Shelter's Facebook page. There was Irene, smiling, standing next to a donor. There she was again, arms looped with Rachel's, holding a small bouquet of lilies someone must have handed her after the speech. Her fingers clenched the trackpad. Of course she wore pearls, Marlene muttered. Cody glanced up from his phone. What is it now? She's being applauded, she hissed, for giving away what should have been ours. Cody went back to texting. Let her have her moment. Marlene slammed the laptop shut and left the room. Back at the banquet hall, one of the younger volunteers, a tall man with shaggy hair and too much charm, tapped Irene on the shoulder. Miss Haskins, may I have this dance? Irene hesitated for only a second, then she took his hand. They danced under 2 bright chandeliers and over scuffed floors, and when Irene laughed, truly laughed, it came from deep in her chest, unfiltered and unafraid. She wasn't reclaiming her old life. She was writing a new one. The cursor blinked steadily at the top of the blank Word document. Irene sat at her desk, elbows squared, glasses low on her nose. The living room behind her was dark, save for the low flicker of the front porch light and the slow hum of the radiator coming alive. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. Then she began to type, How I donated my house without losing my home. I am 72 years old. I have a house I paid off over 30 years. Ago. I also have a grandson and a daughter-in-law who began treating that house like it was already theirs, even while I was still living in it. They thought I was slow, fragile, easy to steamroll. They called it help when they used my car, support when they parked in my driveway, and family when they demanded more. So I did the only thing that made sense. I gave it away. The words came easier than she expected, measured, but with a spine. A story not about revenge, but reclamation. She read it aloud when she was done, once, then twice, before emailing it to Rachel and Erica with the subject line, Just an idea. Use it if it's helpful. By the next morning, the idea had a headline. Still Standing. How One Ohio Grandmother Rewrote the Rules of Home Ownership. The piece was picked up by 3 senior living blogs, shared in a Facebook group for women's legal advocacy, and reposted on Twitter by someone named @GrannyGrit with the caption, This woman is my new religion. Irene didn't check the shares. Rachel did. By week's end, the Monroe Community Center had printed the article, framed it, and mounted it just to the left of the front desk, right beneath the corkboard full of job postings and flu shot flyers. Irene's face in black and white, mid-laugh, the pearls around her neck catching just enough light in the photo to make her look a little regal. That night, as she was finishing dishes, her phone buzzed. From Cody Haskins. Subject, Re. You think you won? Read this. Irene opened the message with no rush. The email was long, erratic, rambling accusations, half-truths, threats dressed as laments. You had no right to do this. You embarrassed us. You were supposed to leave it to family. You're lucky you even had us. This is why no one wants to help old people anymore. You all turn bitter and paranoid. I hope the place falls apart with you in it. At the bottom, a line in all caps. You think you won? Irene didn't reply. She forwarded it to Erica with a simple note. For record. No response necessary. Then she opened her email settings and unsubscribed from every contact labeled Haskins. A week later, Marlene was gone. No announcement, no fight. Just vanished like steam from a kettle that finally stopped boiling. One of the neighbors said she'd seen movers at dawn, loading a storage pod in the driveway. Another mentioned something about a cousin in Phoenix. Irene didn't ask. She watched from the upstairs bedroom window as the last box was carried out. Cody wasn't helping. He was sitting on the porch steps, phone in hand, hoodie pulled over his eyes like the world owed him shade. By noon, the swing on the porch creaked gently, empty. Irene walked downstairs and brewed herself a pot of coffee. Strong, the kind Harold used to say could put hair on the grout. She opened her notebook to a fresh page. They tried to drown me in quiet. I turned it into a broadcast. As she closed the cover, her doorbell rang once, crisp and light. She glanced out the window. A small girl stood on the porch holding a hand-drawn card. Her mother waited beside her, uncertain but smiling. Irene opened the door. "Are you Ms. Irene?" the girl asked. "I am. We saw you on the poster. My mom said you live where we might move." Irene looked down the street, where soon new life would root itself in soil Cody once stomped through without looking. She crouched slightly, meeting the child's eyes. "Well," she said, "if you're going to live near me, I should know your name." The truck pulled in just after 9, humming low as it backed carefully down the narrow driveway. Irene watched from the porch, coffee in hand, wrapped in a cardigan that still smelled faintly of lavender dryer sheets. A crisp breeze tugged gently at the porch flag she'd rehung last spring, not patriotic, just blue with a white tree silhouette. The front yard was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes not from absence, but from arrival. The woman stepped out first, early 30s, wide-shouldered, tired in a way Irene recognized too well. Not defeated, just stretched thin. The little girl followed, dragging a purple duffel bag and gripping the hand-drawn card Irene had already placed on her fridge. Irene met them at the path. "Vanessa, right?" she asked. The woman nodded. "Yes, and this is Lila." The girl smiled shyly. "Hi, Miss Irene." Irene smiled back. "Hi, neighbor." The layout was simple. The back of the house, long ago converted for Harold's physical therapy, had a separate entrance, kitchenette, and a small sitting room. Rachel had worked with the local trades program to freshen the paint and rewire the outlets. Irene had made the space feel lived in. A small table with flowers, fresh curtains, a stack of books left purposefully by the window seat. They moved quietly, gently, as though not wanting to disturb something sacred. Vanessa placed her framed photos on the shelf without fanfare. Lila opened the bottom drawer of the dresser and began arranging, her socks like tiny scrolls. "Let me know if anything needs fixing," Irene said. "Tommy swears by duct tape and a wrench, but I've learned to ask before either show up." Vanessa gave a grateful nod. "We're just happy to be somewhere steady." That word landed heavy. Irene nodded back, then turned toward the yard. Later that afternoon, Irene found herself in the garden plot beside the porch. The soil was stubborn, years of neglect, compacted by boot prints that hadn't belonged. She bent low, digging with a hand spade, loosening the earth. "Can I help?" Lila's voice called from behind. Irene looked over her shoulder. Got gloves? The girl held up a pair. Mismatched, one striped, one pink. Perfect, Irene said. They worked side by side, knees in the grass, dirt under fingernails. Irene showed her how to gently break the roots from a pot of marigolds before planting. Lila insisted on naming each one. This one's Felicity. This one's Banana Muffin. Tommy showed up just as the last plant went in. He leaned over the gate with a toolbox in one hand and a bag of seed packets in the other. Thought these might come in handy, he said. Cosmos, lavender, maybe some snapdragons if you feel rebellious. Irene took the bag. We like a little rebellion around here. Tommy nodded toward the house. They settling in okay? Irene watched through the window as Vanessa unpacked a small radio and placed it near the stove. A quiet song, Motown maybe, filtered through the screen. They're not trying to claim anything, Irene said. They're just trying to belong. That's the difference, isn't it? Tommy said. Wanting to share, not to take. That evening, Irene sat by her desk, the notebook open under warm lamplight. She wrote slowly, deliberately. Peace is possible. It just takes paperwork and nerve. Then she added another line beneath it, hesitant at first, but insistent once it hit the page. Family isn't who insists on staying. It's who shows up right. She closed the notebook and stood to check the porch lights. Inside, Vanessa was helping Lila into pajamas. The laughter was soft, domestic, the kind that didn't echo because it didn't need to fill emptiness. Outside, the porch swing moved again, not with weight, but with wind. The kind that carried things away before, now returning something else. A knock came at the door. Irene opened it to find a cardboard box with no name. On top, a single sheet of paper. We'll see you in court. C.H. She sighed and smiled. The city auditorium smelled like floor wax and folding chairs. Streamers in shades of pale gold hung in loose arcs above the stage, swaying gently with the AC's wheeze. Irene sat stage left in a row of metal chairs draped with honoree sashes, her back straight, her palms resting in her lap. Her name sat printed in bold font on the event program, Irene M. Haskins, Lifetime Community Impact. Next to her, a man who'd donated baseball uniforms to the middle school shifted in his seat, muttering about parking. She simply nodded, gaze fixed forward. She wasn't here for claps or plaques. She was here to make sure no one forgot how she got here. Rachel approached the mic first, dressed in a deep emerald blouse and a pair of black slacks that meant business. The applause quieted as she cleared her throat. Some donations come with strings, she said. Others come with instructions. But this one came with a reminder that ownership without respect is hollow, and boundaries aren't just fences. Sometimes they're lifelines. She turned to gesture toward Irene. Tonight, we honor a woman who taught this city something most of us had forgotten. That legacy isn't measured by bloodline. It's measured by what you build when no one's cheering yet. The applause rose slowly but steadily. Rachel stepped aside. Irene stood. The stage lights hit her like heat, bright, focused, unblinking. She walked to the podium unhurried, her cane hooked on the crook of one arm but untouched. When she reached the mic, she adjusted it by half an inch and leaned in slightly. Her voice, when it came, was cool steel. No one parks where they don't pay anymore. A ripple of chuckles, then silence again, waiting. I gave away my house. Some called it brave, some called it foolish. But the truth is simpler. I stopped waiting for gratitude from people who didn't know how to give it, and I started building the kind of community I'd want to inherit myself. She paused. I'm not here to make a point. I'm here because someone needed to, and because sometimes the only way to keep your house is to change what it means to have one. She nodded once, stepped back. The applause was thunderous. The baseball uniform donor even stood. By the time she returned to her seat, someone had already handed her the plaque. It was a simple black and gold rectangle, not heavy, not flashy. For contribution, clarity, and courage, Irene M. Haskins. Later, a reporter from the Oak Ridge Bulletin took photos, one of her with Rachel, another near the city seal, and a final one outside beside the center's newly installed flower bed where Lila had insisted on planting banana muffin. The story hit local press the next morning. Then it got picked up by Midwest Home Legacy Digest, then Seniors Rising, then, to her absolute shock, the Atlantic's online voices section. Rachel called to read her the title, Still Standing, The Widow Who Rewrote the Rules of American Inheritance. Irene laughed so hard she nearly dropped the phone. 2 weeks later, the calls started coming in. One woman from Sandusky, another from Louisville, then one from Maryland, all of them older, all of them with stories too familiar. "I saw your speech," one said. "I thought I was crazy for even thinking about eviction." "I don't want to be cruel," said another, "but I want my name on the mail again." Irene didn't offer advice. She offered structure. She mailed checklists, shared Erica's legal language, even helped one woman script a conversation with her lawyer. Before long, the Monroe Center gave her a folding desk in a quiet back room. Nothing fancy, just a space, a place for her to meet women like herself who weren't afraid to rewrite their wills while still living in them. One Thursday afternoon, Irene sat at that desk, reviewing a draft letter for a woman named Dottie. Outside, Lila was drawing chalk hopscotch on the sidewalk. Vanessa was in the garden, humming softly. Irene glanced at the plaque now hanging above her folding desk, just below the wall clock. She didn't need a mirror anymore. This was enough reflection. A chime sounded on her phone. An email from Erica. Subject, final court filing received. Cody's appeal dismissed. Permanently. Irene let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding for 3 months. And in that moment, one final chapter began writing itself. The morning the plaque was delivered, Irene didn't wear pearls. She wore denim and a soft gray cardigan with elbow patches that Harold had always called professorial. It was the kind of outfit you chose when the moment was formal, but the victory was personal. Tommy pulled up in his truck just after 10, toolbox already rattling in the back. "You want it dead center?" he asked, lifting the polished bronze plate with both hands. Irene studied the front of the house where the ivy had finally been trimmed back to reveal the clean white trim Harold had painted himself all those years ago. "No," she said. "Offset, left side. People turn their heads that way first." Tommy grinned. Still the sharpest sightline in Ohio. He mounted the plaque with care, each screw tightened with deliberate precision. As he worked, Vanessa and Lila emerged from the back unit, holding paper cups of lemonade for everyone. Rachel pulled into the driveway a minute later, waving from behind the wheel of her dusty hybrid. The tenants from the housing program, 3 women and 1 retired man with a cane made of polished wood, gathered quietly on the lawn. No speeches, just presence. Respect made visible. Tommy stepped down from the ladder. "All yours," he said, motioning toward the wall. Irene stepped forward and read the inscription aloud, her voice steady. "Still standing, still sovereign, Irene Haskins' house." She didn't cry, she just nodded once and turned back toward the porch. Everyone applauded, not loudly, just enough to say, "We see you." By noon, the porch had become its own kind of stage. Irene sat in her rocking chair, a fresh cup of tea beside her, the warm breeze tugging gently at the hem of her slacks. Lila sat cross-legged at her feet, braiding yarn into her doll's hair. Vanessa waved from the garden gate as she walked toward the center. "Back in a bit, Miss Irene." "I'm not going anywhere," Irene replied. They both smiled. From the sidewalk, the plaque caught the light, not glaring, just enough glint to make someone slow down. A neighbor jogged by and tapped a hand to their chest in acknowledgement. A young mom pushing a stroller paused to take a picture. Not of Irene, of the house, of the name on it. A few minutes later, a familiar hybrid rolled down the block. Rachel honked once, sharp, cheerful, just for them, then disappeared around the corner. "Who was that?" Lila asked, sipping her lemonade. "Someone who believed me before I believed myself," Irene said. The little girl nodded solemnly, as if she understood something larger than her years. "Will I get to live in a house with my name on it someday?" "If you want it," Irene said. "But more important, make sure you're the one who decides where the front door goes." They sat in silence for a while. Birds chirped in the distance. A lawnmower buzzed 2 blocks over. The world, stubborn and ordinary, carried on, but softer now. More hers. Inside, the kitchen was stocked, the plants watered, the bills paid on time. Outside, her name was etched in metal. Not a tombstone, a marker of something still alive. She didn't just own the house. She authored it. As the sun began its slow descent behind the maple trees across the street, casting gold light over the porch steps, Lila leaned her head gently against Irene's knee, and Irene smiled, not wistfully, not for the past, but because the ending didn't feel like an ending at all. She looked up at the sky, wide and unbothered, and said to no one in particular, "They called me slow. I just took the time to win." Irene Haskins, title holder, mentor, architect of her own peace.